Good evening, everyone. Time for episode 23 of The Last Admiral, part 3 of the Dwarheim Staff Saga. Today we'll begin where we left off on page 180. Chapter entitled The Red Captain. Admiral Gravina rode near the head of his army of 4,000 Dragonian Marines, including several hundred elite cavalry and special troops. His red mail, silver helmet, and fine stallion combined to make him an awe-inspiring figure. Some of his scouts had returned with news of the enemy's movements, but many of them had not, and so far, their skirmishes had proven to be one-sided in favor of the rebels. Another scout fast approached him upon a swift gray steed. Reining in his steed, he delivered his urgent report. Admiral, the Furmen have divided their forces. One group, carrying their wounded, flees towards Sina, while a few others have retreated into the hills. No doubt they will try and delay our advance, Gravina observed. Take a fresh horse and try to locate the position of the remaining guerrillas. We will make camp here until morning. If we can delay them long enough, they may return to Sina only to find that their transports have all sailed away. When the army has advanced to your new position, deliver your report. Yes, Admiral, the scout replied. Turning his horse, he was soon fast away. Gravina studied the terrain. It was a beautiful island. A towering volcano dominated the skyline to the northeast. At its feet, the Sina road wound lazily along the most accommodating terrain through the mountains. Mostly rocky, and at other times sandy, it was well bridged over crossing streams, and now, as his army neared the lower slopes of the volcano, a great river flowed southward to the sea along the eastern edge of the road. A broad green salt marsh skirted the river on both sides, but was especially expansive along the far eastern bank. Beyond it the terrain was sparse, but a healthy forest climbed nearly halfway to the peak of the smoking volcano. To the west, the mountainous interior of Sicily wound densely toward the heart of the island and northward. Sparse grasses and the occasional fig and olive trees spotted their slopes, but the enemy remained well hidden despite the lack of cover, no doubt planning another ambush ahead. A massive knight in dark plate mail, seated upon a gray Percheron, rode up alongside of him. His tabard was blue, with a black insignia of a standing dragon embroidered upon it. His helm rested on a lanyard off the side of his saddle, as the day's heat made wearing it unbearable. A thick-bladed bastard sword was ready and near to his hands. A fine day, Admiral, Driscoll declared. It seems odd that the Furmen never set fire to these bridges. They had no time, Gravina said, but their leader is no fool. He fights well, with a small force. Why was it not like that for Hispania? Driscoll replied musingly. My father kept at the fight until there was no hope left. We fight for Dragonia now, Driscoll, Gravina warned, and you would do best to remember it. But I, too, remember the old days. I am with you as always, my Admiral. I am honored to have a captain and sword-bearer of your stature, Driscoll. We are entering into dangerous times, and difficult decisions will have to be made. We must be getting close to these Furmen, Driscoll observed. Sina is not too far off. Will you push forward and engage them? No, there is an easier way, he explained. They seek to delay us, but their own tactics can defeat them as well. Make camp. Tomorrow will be time enough to capture these Furmen. Third Hill towered above most of the island and commanded a grand view of the surrounding sea, the village of Sina, and the road at its base. Well past midnight, Sergeant Ruiz kept a careful watch near the mountain's peak. To the west, a great fleet of ships had landed at Sifa, with 12 ships still anchored offshore. Their disembarked. Beg your pardon? Their disembarked army was now encamped, with over 100 fires along the beach and throughout the village. To the south, another vast army had marched within 10 miles of their position and bivouacked. Still more disturbing was that only one ship remained in Port Sina, a large warship with triple masts in the apparently empty village. Sergeant Sturgill relieved them at midnight. Ruiz crept down the slope in search of Sir John and made his report. "We are nearly surrounded, sir," he whispered. "They have landed an army at Sifa, and another equal force pursues us from the south. Every transport except for one has already left the island, and Sina appears deserted." "We've done everything that we could," Sergeant Sir John said. "Order the company to mount up. We'll stick to the mountain trails. No doubt they are watching the road ahead of us." "I am on it, sir." Slipping away quietly, Sergeant Ruiz worked his way around their position to each team of rangers. Pair by pair, they snuck off, working their way around the northern slopes of the mountain to the place where their horses were hidden. Arriving at the rally point, their mounts remained. It was a true miracle. Sir John gave them swift orders. "Rangers, only one ship remains in Sina to take us out of here. By dawn, the enemy will be on the move, and we will be out of luck. We know these trails, but the ride will be longer. If you separate, do not stop for anything. Ride on to Sina." Fear and tension were tangibly thick around them. The horses sensed it and fussed in agitation. Sergeant Sturgill came back down the slope in a run. "Sir John," he reported, "we have troops moving in on us from all sides." "How many enemies did you see?" "Many hundreds, sir," Sturgill affirmed. "They must have worked their way around us after nightfall." "Rangers, ride for the northeast trail. If we can't punch our way through them, then we're finished." Stepping into the saddle, he adjusted his sword belt and steadied his horse. "Ruiz, what is our head count?" 106, sir. Squire Gissock and Sir Percival are missing." "Where were they posted?" "They should have been right here, sir. Something must have drawn them off." "We are out of time," Sir John observed. "The enemy may have cut them off. Let us hope that we find them on the trail ahead. Squad leaders, do not fight unless you must, and try not to break off from the main company unless it is necessary to protect your rangers. If they pin us down, none of us will get clear of here. We will regroup at Sina." Just at that moment, to the southeast, came a great blast, sending a flash of fire, yellowish gases, and rock skyward out of Bong Bong Lulong, the island's one active volcano, whose name meant bubbling flow. "Move out," Sir John commanded. "No need to kick me twice," Sturgill said with a grin. "Squire David," Sir John directed, "stay close to me." "You won't be shaking me loose, sir." Sir John's Rangers was but 108 soldiers, but the losses that they had inflicted on the enemy while operating on the island were fully 10 times greater. Sir John was, above all things, wise, and he could well sense that Jin Jang Lo was delivering his final stroke against them. He had no intention of waiting for it to fall, not as long as they still had some chance of escape. His Rangers were all good soldiers, both men and women among them, and he did not intend to sacrifice any more of their lives if he could help it. They had been fighting in these mountains for weeks against a host of determined enemies who had occupied it for months, and only their superior training, tactics, and tenacity had allowed them to outsmart them. The scales of war were fickle things, and clearly it had now tipped strongly in the favor of the Drow. Now he prayed that the king's ship, their last salvation, had yet to sail. They rode as hard and as fast as the terrain allowed them to, both horses and riders pushing to their limits. Drow scouts harassed them with arrows, but they lacked sufficient strength to stop them. By some miracle, Their main forces had not reached the paths of their escape route, and the Rangers narrowly avoided the closing perimeter of the enemy's scouts. Dawn arrived as they rounded the slopes of Last Hill, so named because it was the endmost mountain peak before the adjoining foothills that ran down to the sea and the port city of Sina. Last Hill itself was a steep, rocky tangle of random slopes, deep crevasses, cliffs, and overhanging boulders. The soil was scarce and the vegetation thin. It was a tall mountain, but not so high that snow could linger at its peak. Sir John led them to a defensible place and took a head count. Sergeant Ruiz is missing, Sir Andrew, a tall, blond-haired knight with a large smile and broad teeth, reported. And Sir Percival and Squire Gissock never linked up with us. Who saw Ruiz last? Sir John asked. He was the rear guard, sir, Sir Andrew replied. He was right behind me until a few minutes ago. Damn, Sir John swore. He must have gone back for them. Look there, sir. Ranger Goodale yelled down to them from his high vantage point atop of a great jagged outcropping of rock that well resembled the hawkish face of an old man. One ship is still anchored at Sina, and it is flying the Golden Lion. What type of ship is it? It's hard to tell from here, sir, but I would say that it's a fast frigate. That's just big enough for the lot of us, Sir John said hopefully. Oh no, Goodale muttered. We've got to move, sir. A fleet of dragon ships is approaching from the west. How far out are they? They are a few miles out at most, sir. The wind is against them, but we don't have much time. Sir John knew that his exhausted troops would almost surely never make it to the ship before necessity forced it to set sail in full flight. But if any troops could, it was his Rangers. Sir Andrew, lead the company to that ship and get the hell off of this island. What are you going to do, sir? I can't leave those men behind while we still have a chance. You'll never make it, sir. I won't risk the entire battalion, Sir John stated, turning his horse to stand alongside Andrew's, but I've got to try and find them. Sir Andrew knew that their chances were slim, so he simply shook hands and said, It's been an honor, sir. The honor was all mine, Sir John replied. Rangers lead the way, sir. All the way, he responded. Let's go, men, Sir Andrew commanded. 5,000 more yards, and we're home. On the double, Rangers, and let no soldier fall behind. Jin Jang Lo's soldiers were not yet in sight behind them, but the thought of dozens of black dragon ships carrying their reapers or worse, coupled with a nervous ship's captain who was eager to escape, was motivation enough for one company of knights with no other hope of ever returning home. Racing against death, exhausted, ignoring pain, pushing themselves to the limit and helping each other when needed, they drove on to their objective. Squire David wheeled his horse to join his masters. Go now, Sir John ordered. I release you from my service. You're a fine ranger, but I can't ask you to come with me this time. I'm going with you, he promised with conviction. Someone's got to watch your back. We might not make it. Damn it, lead on, sir. Thinking hard about the mountain trails that his lost rangers may have taken, Sir John turned back. After weeks of fighting in these hills, he was an expert in navigating the terrain. It did not take him long to realize where Sir Percival and Squire Gissock must have become lost and taken a fateful turn. Even worse, he knew that was exactly what Sergeant Ruiz was thinking too. If he was correct, they had traveled too far to the north and entered the winding foothill paths at the base of Fourth Hill. Jin Jang Lo's forces were close, and he had no doubt that the enemy would soon encircle them and prevent their escape. He knew what to do. Leave your armor here, Sir John urged, and everything else that weighs anything except for your weapons. We either win this race or we die. Dismounting, they helped each other unbuckle their chainmail hauberks, cuisse, and greaves, and discarded them. Mounting, they drank their remaining water and rode carefully down the slope, entering the maze-like pathways of Fourth Hill in the hopes of finding their lost rangers. In a little more than a mile, they had succeeded. "Red rum," he called forth. "And all of the king's horses are white," Sir Percival answered from his hiding place. "It's good to see you, sir." "Leave your armor and packs here," Sir John commanded. "The last ship is soon to leave us behind. Jin Jang Lo is marching against us with thousands of troops, and a fleet of dragon ships will soon force our ride home to set sail." "Is that all?" Ruiz said. He was a stocky, fit lad, with dark eyes and a dark complexion known for his boxing skills. "I knew that this mission was a one-way trip." "At least we have each other," Squire Jisic commented jokingly as he patted his horse. "Poncho here has one good run left in him." "Good," Ruiz replied. "I'll be pissed if I have to ride double with you." "Follow me," Sir John urged. "We're riding out of here. 5 yards spread between us, and keep your eyes peeled. Stealth is worthless now. If the drow are already behind us, then we are finished." Leading them truly, they soon escaped the jagged, mountainous maze and were running northeast across the foothills toward the shoreline in the eastern roads. Less than a mile to the west, Jin Jang Lo's army was in sight and marching hard toward their position. His fleet was sailing fast before the wind and would soon force Lord Cherrick's last transport to set sail. And the footnotes are about armor and such. Okay. "Rangers," Sir John cried, "ride for your lives." Ahead of them, Cena was now in sight as well. He could see his battalion. They had made it. But no. Some skirmish had erupted in the streets and on the pier near their ship. Jin Jang Lo had set a trap for them. Behind them, a squad of 9 Dragonian soldiers was rapidly gaining on them, clearly aided by black magic. "Ride on, Percival," Sir John commanded. "Save the ship, and get our rangers the hell out of here." Torn between taking a stand with his commander and following orders, Sir John's conviction finally swayed him. In the end, it probably wouldn't matter anyway. Enemies surrounded them on all sides, and combat was unavoidable. He did as commanded. "Good luck, sir." Sir John and David dismounted. Guiding their horses behind a cluster of nearby trees, they took cover. Waiting for the enemy runners to come into range, Sir John set his quiver in the crook of a tree's trunk, nocked an arrow, and took careful aim. Trained in all aspects of chivalry and the knight's code, he was an expert archer, and his bow's draw rate was a full 100 pounds. 5 arrows left his hands, sailing through the morning sky, and 5 Dragonian marines fell in the sand. He had time to kill a 6th, but his quiver was empty. Catching his breath just as they closed in on them, he drew his sword and dagger and stepped out to meet them. Squire David stood with him, slightly behind him, and to his left. "Surrender, Rangers," their leader said in bad Firmish, "or die." Sir John faced them bravely, remembering his Munson home with its soft-wooded hills, babbling brooks filled with trout, green fields, fat cows, and holiday dinners. He smiled back at them. Surrender was not in his family's blood, but neither did he crave death, for life was sacred to him despite his duty. The drow footmen were fast, driven as they were by a fell enchantment that doubled their speed. But they were soldiers with weapons of melee, and as such, they were unable to strike at them without moving in. Their superior numbers and extremist zeal made them overconfident, foolish, and sloppy. And that's where we'll leave it at the bottom of page 187. Next time we'll find out how Sir John and Squire David fare against their drow assailants at the top of page 188. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great night.